dark side. Light this bitch up.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. In 2010, I did something kind of silly when I ran to become the mayor of Toronto. I was running against Rob Ford and George Smitherman and Joe Pantalone and Rocco Rossi and the crazy cat lady herself, whose name that just popped out of my brain, Sarah Thompson. Now, when I did that, I actually had a reason to do it that had nothing to do with me thinking I was going to win. I just thought that I saw a stat that said that the last municipal election saw something like an 18% turnout for voters between the ages of 18 and 34. And I thought that that was just abysmal. So I ran, and when I say ran, I'm using air quotes, by opening up my laptop in my kitchen, and most days just like campaigning, air quotes again, in a pair of boxers. Now, the interesting thing about that is that I did happen to learn a lot about how the process works. I knew how much it cost. It was $200 at the time. I don't know how much it is now, to run for mayor, or maybe it was $180. And I understood. One of the coolest things about running for mayor, by the way, is that you can call the city hall clerk and basically get any stat that you want anytime it pops into your head. It's kind of amazing. So when I participated in one debate, it happened to be the biggest debate. I just happened to win an online poll, so I was like one of the candidates there. So it was me, Rob Ford, Rocco Rossi, Joe Pantalone, and George Smitherman. And I was terrified, and I did okay. But the really interesting thing is that all of these people that were on stage sounded similar, with the exception of me and Rob Ford. We didn't sound the same either. But the process itself, there were dozens and dozens of people that were running. Fringe candidates, first of all, they're called fringe candidates. And so the media automatically sort of picks their horses when the election starts and when people start throwing their name in. This election in June in Toronto, a little bit different. We had John Tory resign after it was discovered that he had an extramarital affair, and he thought it would be better to leave. I disagreed. What do I know? But this election is a little bit different. There is no clear frontrunner. There isn't even, I don't think, a stable of candidates that the media can put their claws into and be like, these are the ones you got to focus on. And not to say that they're fringe candidates, because I don't think they're that either. However, tonight we have a person who used to be a Toronto councilor and a York councilor. Someone corrected me on that today. I said North York councilor. And I think he's got a viable shot of winning. His name is Rob Davis. Rob, how are you, buddy?
I'm really good. It's good to see you again. And, glad to be on your show.
Thank you very much. Here's the thing. So why the hell are you running for mayor of Toronto? It seems like a city that might be in a little bit of crisis. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, but that sounded more like a funny thing. What is the main reason that you're running? Because I know that it is a very stressful thing to run a mayoral campaign.
Well, the city is in crisis, and that's why I'm running. I think somebody once, one of my opponents said that the city is broken, and I don't think the city is broken. I think the city is like an old house that needs repair. It has good bones, but it needs some tender, loving care. And so I'm running because I want to make the city safer. I want to make it cleaner. I want to make the city kinder. It seems to me that those sort of three things are inextricably tied to our well-being, tied to the future of the city, tied to our economic, social, and emotional prosperity. The violence that we see erupting on the transit system is nothing new. But what we've seen is an escalation in the amount of random acts of violence on the subway. People have a sense that the city needs a good scrubbing down. Like if my cleaning lady showed up, she might say that it needs some Brillo pad to get things spit shiny again, and we need some kindness. I was very disturbed to see the city vote to close warming stations back in January, February, and it struck me that where did they think homeless people were going to go if you shut down warming centers in the middle of a cold snap or in advance of a cold snap? They went to libraries, they went to subways, they went to places where they could stay warm. They're in distress, and now we have this challenge. We might save $100,000 on a warming center, but we're losing millions of dollars in subway ridership and revenue from the subway. And so safety on the subway is tied to the level of kindness that we exhibit to people who are in distress, have mental health and addiction issues. To me, it seems so obvious, but to city council, I think they didn't realize the unintended consequences of decisions like that. And that's just an example of an unintended consequence. Behind me is a Dundas Street West sign. And I have to say this, that spending $21 million or more to change the names of 60 Toronto streets is an example of misguided priorities and wasteful spending, because I care more about the homeless person who lives on Dundas Street than I do about changing the name of Dundas Street. And I think council seems to swing hither and yon on these decisions. Doesn't seem to be, or didn't seem to be, a sort of a guiding principle. I think they just get swept up with the zeitgeist of the moment, what's popular at the moment. And instead of realizing that it's great that you want to decolonize Toronto and, be respectful of our First Nations and BIPOC community, but I have to tell you, not one Black child is going to graduate from university because they changed the name of Dundas Street. Not one more First Nations child is going to graduate from university because they changed the name Dundas Street. And I'd rather put those dollars into helping people rather than to symbolic performative actions.
That is a super good point. And it's, what is it, 20 million?
$21 million. But Dundas Street alone is $6 million. So I just don't believe that one street is $6 million and the other 59 streets, it's only going to cost $15 million.
Okay, but why? Like, here's what I don't understand. Are there municipal rules and regulations that I am not familiar with that says if you want to do something like change the name of Dundas Street, you have to hire the most expensive unionized people ever, and they can take 80 hours per sign at 6 guys, one of them holding one of those slow and stop signs? Like, is that how it works?
No. So I think the challenge with Dundas Street is that it's a long and winding road, if I can quote the Beatles. And then along the way, there are also city assets that would have to have their names changed, like Young Dundas Square. So when you start looking at the cost of rebranding Young Dundas Square, the search for a replacement name and the consultants who would be used in that search, and then there are all the stakeholders. We call them stakeholders in politics, but they're actually the residents affected. So you have to engage the business community, the people who live in houses and condos and rental apartment buildings, and people who have the name Dundas in the name of their business have to be consulted. And so there's a tremendous cost to doing that. And in my fair estimation, when the city of Toronto has a $1 billion hole that has been filled by reserve spending of their reserves, that's a more pressing issue. Having to sort of defer or delay capital projects because you've raided the reserves in order to fund your operating costs, that's the most pressing need, because the city has to still function. We still have to run trains, and we have to fill potholes and pave roads and run.
Rob, time out. I have to give my son a hug here. I have to give my son a hug, and he doesn't want to be on camera, so I'm going to put you.
Okay, give him a hug. You know what? If you give him a hug, just bring him in.
You're off camera. You're off camera. Here, give me a hug. We'll talk about it later. I love you. Okay.
This is great. I love it. Fatherly love. That's
He didn't see you.
spectacular.
He heard
I
you.
love
Buddy.
that.
He heard you.
And you didn't embarrass him by hugging him on camera.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
I didn't
that's
embarrass
good.
him by hugging him on camera. No, this was their first night staying here since they had moved with their mom, and I think the adjustment is just weird, especially when I have to podcast at this time. So so they're gonna go back to mom's now, and that's cool. Okay, 21 million is obscene. I think that we could. I have a solution. I think that we can take. What are they called? Not palindromes. The things that like you can scramble the letters and just make a different name. We can come up with like sad nud or something, and we can just rearrange the letters. I bet you if you asked 1 million Torontonians, who is the Dundas that Dundas Street is named after? I think like less than 1% would even know who the person is.
They would have no idea. By the way, I'm trying to. We got a few messages about reverb on the show.
Yeah, it's your. I think it's your echo. How bad is it?
I don't know. Well, let's ask the audience.
Do you have any other tabs open?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How's that? Is that better?
I think so. Is that? It sounds better to me. If you close everything else except for this tab, then usually
I'm doing that now. Is that better? I hear a little echo too, so I don't know.
You know what? We might have to deal with the little echo, and that's fine. Okay. This is really important to me, the whole thing about these signs, because I know it sounds almost ridiculous to even talk about this stuff, but like it is, when you talk about closing $100,000 warming center and people are like, well, what was the reason for that? I think they cited cost. They also were really symbolically doing it in January, which I was just like, maybe it's something you want to do in the late spring.
Right.
You know, if you're going to do something like that.
It was cruel, quite honestly.
Yeah. And did it come into effect immediately, or were they going to wait till the following year?
No, they did it immediately. And again, I just want to say, I think we have to really look at these issues in their totality. We have to really think what is the outcome? What are the unintended consequences? With the subway, for instance, they're looking at 10 years ago, they awarded a contract to a company to bring cell service. That company, they promised them $25 million. They didn't deliver on cell service because they're making money in a different manner. They're making money from the advertising that they get from the Wi-Fi, and they're not making money from the cell service. And so they basically outmaneuvered the Toronto Transit Commission, and only 25% or 24% of the tunnels have cellular service 10 years after the contract. So most people don't know this, but I was a witness to the very first shooting on a Toronto subway in March 28th, 2008. It was 15 years ago.
Wow.
And guess what? I was scared to death. I wasn't gonna swear and say I was scared, shitless. I won't say that online. But I couldn't use my phone, and I had to run to the payphone to dial 911. And even then, they didn't know where I was, and I had to call back because the wait was so long. I'm sure there are a few expletives on the recording of the 911 call. That my mother would make my mother blush.
Well, I never thought of that actually as a good reason to have cell coverage down there. I kind of used to, when I lived in Toronto, looked at the subway as, oh, I got a moment to unplug, Right. But I understand for the emergency situation. So listen, I don't want to sound like I'm a right winger, and I certainly don't want to portray you a far right winger. I don't want to portray you as some crazy conservative or anything. But $20 million is a lot to come off as sort of like that bad kind of woke. Like it is just very expensive. I don't. I am not up to speed, but did it already pass?
So they approved Dundas. They haven't approved the others.
Right.
But there's
Dundas
a report
is 6
there
million.
that,
You said.
yeah, 6 million for Dundas. So
That's 60 warming stations. In case you're doing the math at home, everybody.
Right. But there's another thing to tell you. Let me just get. I'm going to turn the volume down a wee bit.
Okay.
And that might help with the echo. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. I don't know how the audience feels, but
well, I can hardly
we're
hear
already
you, but that's okay.
balls deep, so we might as well keep going. Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's an element of wokeism, but it's not full wokeism because Sir George Young traded slaves after slavery was abolished. The person who reported him was a guy named Dundas. This guy right here. Sir George Young lost everything because Dundas reported him to the king for trading in slaves after the abolition, number one. Number two, if we really wanted to decolonize Toronto and decolonize Toronto streets, how come nobody suggested changing King Street or Queen Street?
Yeah, that's a great point. They're only the longest running welfare family, genocide, colonialist monarchy ever.
Yeah, there's a long history of challenges with the monarchy. That's for sure.
I love the diplomacy that just oozes out of a current candidate for municipal office.
Given that Her Majesty recently passed and His Majesty will soon be coronated, there'll be a coronation for His Majesty. I don't want to unsettle the monarchists in your audience.
I don't think that if it's my audience, they probably don't really have very many monarchists. I want to let's shift gears here for a second. I want to know if you think that I often look at politics as sometimes that we are on sort of borrowed time. Sorry, I've muted you because when I talk, it's I don't want it to echo anything. So when I look at politics like this. Sometimes I think that we're on borrowed time. I'll give you an example. I think Al Gore probably legit won the 2000 election, and I think that the entire Bush administration was borrowed time. I think that Bernie Sanders was sort of cheated by the DNC out of the primary with Hillary Clinton, and so I feel like the campaign in 2016 was sort of like borrowed time. I don't feel John Tory should have resigned. So I feel like whoever steps into this mayoral chair next is sort of going to be in that weird spot where it's not borrowed time. Well, in my theory, it would be kind of borrowed time, but almost like this isn't really supposed to happen. Do you think John Tory should have resigned in the first place? And now that we are here, is it even productive to even look back and wonder about that?
So no, I mean, I think there's some good lessons from what happened to John Tory, and let me say, John Tory is an old acquaintance. I've known him for, I'm going to age myself, a good 40 years. I think he did the right thing. I think he did the honorable thing. And it's not because he had an extramarital affair. And it's not that it's anybody's business whether he and his wife are in a good place, in a good relationship. But the person with whom he's, admitted to having the affair with was somebody who directly reported to him. And so in many corporate environments, that is verboten. That is a no-go. That's something that you don't do. And I think he recognized if he separated out the personal from the professional, that we could forgive him the personal, but at the end of the day, there'd be a problem with the professional. Notwithstanding the fact that the young lady seems to have gone on to work, as reported in the newspaper, for MLSE, which is a partially Rogers' owned entity, and he has obviously some sway at Rogers. So, I don't know the details. I can't comment on any of that. But all I can say is I think he did the right thing, notwithstanding the fact that he was a popular guy, right? A lot of people loved Rob Ford, regardless of his demons. And that's what happens when we have an affinity to a particular candidate. We're often willing to forgive their their foibles, forgive their human failings, right? And I think in this case, that's why a lot of people didn't want John Tory to resign.
Okay. Just from here on in, I am going to mute you while I ask the question, just because I don't want. I guess there's still an echo, but whatever. I can't hear it. So, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about. You have ties to the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. Spotting a black conservative is like spotting a unicorn. It's just kind of rare, and I'm wondering. I know that municipal politics likes to see itself as not partisan. You get rid of the orange, red, and blue, and all that kind of stuff. But we all know that when it comes to voting, often it can be polarized, and there could be like one of two groups. You added the word "kind" in your sort of tagline there for your campaign, and I'm wondering if you're going to approach this in a way that finds a way, and this is going to sound like a politician talking, but that finds a way to bridge the gap between our polarized elected officials.
Yeah, I think so. I look. I'm a partisan when it comes to provincial and federal elections, and when it comes to municipal politics, I'm interested in finding common ground without necessarily having to compromise my principles. When I talk about Dundas and I say I care more about homeless people than I do changing the name, a lot of progressives, people on the left agree with me.
Yeah.
A lot of people on the right agree with me. I think there's a basic decency and a basic humanity that runs deep through the veins of people who live in Canada, regardless of their partisan colors. And nobody has a monopoly on compassion. Nobody. And so when I talk about this issue, even the folks on the right who may want to see get back their $6 million, they say, if you're going to take my money, at least use it for something that's good, that I may not have as my number one priority, but I can sleep well knowing that at the very least they're using it for something that's helping people. And so
I
I
like
think
the way you frame that too. I like
Yeah.
do you want to spend $6 million changing the signs on Dundas Street, or do you want to create 60 warming stations
Warming
or
centers,
10
right.
warming stations and a food bank or a
And-
women's shelter or something like that, right?
Right. And that's important. So it's about priorities. And to be fair, or to be straightforward, the people I'm running against, or the people in the race, they were councillors. They are the makers. They are the creators of the challenges that we have now. So whether it's not to use their names, but Matlow or Bilow or even Saunders and Olivia Chow to a lesser extent because she's been gone for a few years. I mean, they are the authors of this tragedy that's unfolding before us. These challenges that we're having. And so, I'm hopeful, but I just don't see the person who was the housing czar for the last 10 years, who wasn't able to solve the problem, being the person who's the solution. I just don't believe that the folks like Bradford and Matlow, who are great guys, I know them, who voted to defund the police, are the folks who are going to make our streets safer. And I just don't believe that Mr. Saunders, who was the chief of police, who had to leave, or not had to leave, he quit before fulfilling his contractual obligations, and had challenges with policing our city and reducing crime, is the solution to our problems. So I have this odd situation where I have experience, but I'm not responsible for the most recent failings of our city government, and I think I can right the ship.
I'm wondering, and I'll get off this in a second, but the idea of being a black conservative, I only hear, and the media only shows us, often very militant left-wing black people when they're talking on news programs.
Yes.
And that is interesting. Because I'm the kind of guy, I like to listen to academics like even like Larry Elder sometimes. He's interesting to listen to. Coleman Hughes. He's an interesting guy to listen to as well. There are, and also if you do polls, this is true in the United States. So I don't know if this is true in Canada, but oftentimes we do mirror each other. When the defunding the police thing was happening and Black Lives Matter was all over the place in like 2020,
Right.
the the temperature of that movement did not match the polling of black communities. Where
Correct.
in places like Chicago, for example, where the south side of Chicago is a very, very, a violent place, it was like 78% of black residents were like, we don't want to defund the police. Who are we going to call? And so, what do you think? Is there? Because I feel frustrated when I see guys like yourself, who I would consider to be sort of like a moderate conservative or something like that. But you guys are often dismissed out of hand because you're not sort of parroting that line of defund the police, Black Lives Matter, the everything is systemic racism and this and so forth. Is it hard being a black voice when you're not a progressive?
I think it's being hard being a black voice when you don't fit a trope. So, I remember when Black Lives Matter hit Toronto and those young people were protesting in front of police headquarters. I might not have agreed with everything that they were saying, but I believe in my heart that they had a right to be there and they had a right to protest. And so when people were slagging them and calling them thugs, I went to town on, online. I went to town on people. I said, it reminded me of that time Nixon called the hippies, a bunch of bums. And all of a sudden, his Republican conservative base, who were the parents of those hippies, said, "Hey, my kid's not a bum. Like, how dare you?
Yeah.
I disagree with my own kid, but don't you dare call him a bum." I kind of felt like that guy, when people were calling these young black people thugs and hoodlums. I felt like that Republican parent, talking to Nixon.
Right.
Saying I might disagree with my own kid, but he's not a bum or she's not a bum. And so I think there's and I think people change and evolve over time in their beliefs and their understandings of things that will make the world a better place and make their lives better. And so, yes, it's difficult being a black conservative, but it's not the only thing that I am. I'm a conservative first, or I'm a community leader first. And then I'm black. I'm a taxpayer, a resident, a small business owner first, and I just happen to be black. And so there's a fine line that you have to walk. There's a tightrope that you sometimes have to walk. Some people call it code switching. The way you act or talk when you're in different communities, sort of a survival instinct.
That would be like me going. That would be like me going to like Moss Park and be like, "Hello, homies, how are you?" Like trying to
exactly
ingratiate myself.
But people understand when it's authentic and when it's not. So look, my experience, I was in the financial services sector, so I understand numbers. I can read a balance sheet. I can read a financial statement. By the same token, I founded the Caravana Children's Parade when it was on Eglinton Avenue West in Little Jamaica. So I think if I can, I think what the city needs is somebody who has a social conscience, but has a calculator and can look at costs. When I think about 21 million for street signs, $31 million for bike lanes every year. That's a lot of money.
Every year.
And not only is it a lot of money, but I think part of the cause of our congestion are bike lanes in the wrong places. I live on Royal York Road. There's a bike lane out behind me. It functions beautifully. Doesn't reduce the road capacity for vehicles. It's a nice wide bike lane. Cyclists can traverse it safely. And it was the cost of paint. It's not unsightly. It doesn't negatively impact local businesses. And it's a great recreational and touring site for people to get to work, right? People can commute along this road and connect with the Goodman Trail and be downtown in a half an hour. I think I think extending the bike lanes to Bloor Street, Yonge Street, Eglinton Avenue, I think these are things that we have to revisit. Not because we don't want cyclists to be safe, but because I think the negative impact far outweigh the benefits that might accrue to cyclists.
If you can't turn right onto like Gerard off Yonge Street during rush hour, I don't know how you can build a bike lane there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there are so many things. There's so many things in Toronto that promote traffic. I am not a streetcar fan.
Right.
I think it's a kind of a relic from the past. I think that, I mean, London was probably like double-decker buses because it carries more people. And get this, everyone, you can switch lanes.
Yeah.
Like you can carry as many people, and you know, and then the environmental part. But how much do we spend maintaining the TTC because we're sort of beholden to this old way of doing things? And listen, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. It just you know, but the bike lane thing. Because it was championed, are you a little worried that your opponents are gonna try to frame you as being like way far to the right? Like he doesn't even like cyclists. Like, are you afraid of that kind of thing happening?
No, I'm not afraid of that. Look, I'm so I just want to be clear here. Like the 60% of TTC riders are choice riders. They own cars. I'm willing to bet that most cyclists own cars and most car owners have bikes.
Yeah.
So it's not about being anti-bike or anti-car or anti-driver. It's not a war on the car. It's about getting the right balance between active transportation and automobile use. And we have to move people and we have to move goods and we have to drive to places to provide services. And so there's a huge cost in terms of productivity that gets lost if you're driving along Bloor Street and there's only one cyclist or two cyclists, and you got to get places, and we're losing a lane. We're losing that lane at rush hour. We're losing the parking in the off rush hour times. When you drive along Bloor Street, that north side of the street has lost all of its parking. A lot of the decisions we make as consumers are spontaneous purchase decisions. You're driving along, you feel the pangs of hunger. There's a wing place or a pub or a pizza joint or a great Thai restaurant. You can tell I'm thinking of Pad Thai right now. But there's a great Thai restaurant, and so you pull over. And so it's great for cyclists, and I think that's important. But many people, most people do drive, and we need to have the right balance. So I want cyclists to be safe. I want motorists to be able to move. No, I don't want them going 100 kilometers an hour down Bloor Street, but they should be able to go at a reasonable speed. And they should be able to get home and spend family time, and they shouldn't have to have their cars sitting and idling. So, and to me, that's not a left-right issue. It's just about finding the right balance.
Is there a way for a mayor to set an agenda where one of the items for council to vote on would be to somehow incentivize people to not use their cars by giving them some sort of like tax cut or some sort of rebate or something like that?
Right. So that's a good question. I'm not sure that there's a way to incentivize. Well, the way they've incentivized not using the cars by putting in bike lanes and making us having a lot more congestion. But I don't know that it works. There are communities where people are older, they're not going to cycle. Maybe they should, but they're not going to. Some people have children that they have to cart to the soccer game and the basketball game, and they got to visit grandma. Some couples are separated or divorced, and they live in two different parts of the city, and the kids get transported. Groceries. I remember when I first bought my house, I was at Home Depot more often than I wanted to be, because it seemed like every time something went wrong or needed fixing, that I had my wallet out, and I was standing at the checkout line at Home Depot. Well, I can't take lumber on my bike, and I couldn't have lumber delivered via streetcar. I had to take it in my car, and that's just a fact. So incentivizing not using a car. Part of that is the cost, right? The cost of operating a vehicle is expensive. That tends to create a barrier to entry for people who want to own a car. And there are alternatives. We have a fairly robust transit system, and cycling is an option. But again, it's about finding the right balance, keeping cyclists safe, and keeping the transit system safe, so we're not scaring people off.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting issue. I would say that if you live from anywhere from the beaches maybe to, I don't know, Dufferin or Lansdowne maybe, and then north to Eglinton. If you live in that, and then the lake, right? And if you live in that square, you should be taking the TTC to work if you're not doing stuff with kids and everything. I don't even know why you would want to drive downtown Toronto at 8:30 in the morning.
I didn't own a car until 2009, so I came to the party late in terms of car ownership, and that's only out of necessity.
Was that? I don't even have a driver's license. The way that you can tell that I spent the last 25 years in Toronto before coming up here, I just let my license expire. It was a stupid thing to do, but nonetheless, I just let my license. You've turned into a cat, by the way. I don't know how that happened. Rob Davis has transformed into a cat. We have no idea if this is going to be part of his strategy to win over the single middle-aged women crowd. While he's gone and tries to figure out his tech, because Rob, if you're there, I can't hear you or see you anymore. I'm going to play this, and hopefully he's back by the time it ends.
It's former City Councilor Rob Davis.
What happened here yesterday was criminal. No, we're not calling the police, but we are going to be reporting it to the city clerk. You see, myself and a few other candidates running for mayor of Toronto were blocked and stopped from entering a meeting where residents, senior citizens who live here at 175 Cummer Avenue, were expressing their concerns about a development that was happening or that is being applied for immediately next door to where they live. Can you imagine that? Elected officials, paid for by the taxpayers, using their authority to stop residents from being heard. It runs contrary to the Municipal Elections Act, and it runs contrary to the spirit of what the City of Toronto is all about. What I'm going to be doing is filing a complaint with the Integrity Commissioner and filing a complaint with the City Clerk so that residents like you can have your voice heard. When they try to block me from going to that meeting, they're blocking you from being heard. And if I'm elected Mayor of Toronto, I'm going to make sure there'll be no backroom meetings, no backroom deals, and nobody will be blocking your voice from being heard.
So what was that about exactly? And who were the people that stopped you from going in?
Well, it was Councillor Paula Fletcher and Councillor Lily Ying. Councillor Fletcher blocked me and sort of pushed me back a bit. And again, I'm not suggesting that I was
like physically pushed you,
but let's just say she put her hands on me and tried to block my entrance into the building, which is contrary to the Municipal Elections Act and the Residential Tenancies Act.
Can we just pause right there? What was the event?
It was a listening meeting for residents of 175 Cummer Avenue, which is called Willowdale Manor. And they had a number of issues on the agenda, one of which was the development of modular housing on the site for homeless folks. They wanted to do the city wants to build 59 modular units. And basically these are like stacked. I don't want to call them container housing, but it's like prefab units that would be stacked on site. It offers housing opportunities for people who are previously homeless. And the question is whether this is the right mix, having a seniors almost LTC element to a building next to a place where there's going to be services or wraparound services for people who are homeless or were previously homeless and may or may not have addiction and mental health issues.
Right.
So that was the meeting.
Right. And so, but it was open to the public.
Well, depends on how you define public. They posted the letters, the invitation in the elevator and in the common elements of the building.
Okay.
but the invitation didn't suggest it was exclusively for the residents of the building.
Okay. But they wanted
So-
it to be that way. So when other people showed up and they saw mayoral candidates show up, they were like, we don't want to politicize this event. Is that what their point was? Or
Yeah, but attending a meeting doesn't mean you're campaigning. You can attend a meeting and sit and listen. You don't have to hand out brochures and flyers, and you don't have to ask people to vote for you. But I'll tell you this: there are laws against blocking people from going into multi-residential buildings for a reason. And that's so that we have an open democratic process and people can attend and participate and hear views. And these are adults. They're not children. They're senior citizens, and they know what they like. They know what they don't like. They have their political views, and there's nothing wrong with allowing them to see you there. So
it's also slightly ironical, wouldn't it be, Rob, that their message was, listen, it's a good idea to mix demographics, except at this meeting.
Right.
Like,
So I explained to, and the part you didn't show in the video is the confrontation part.
You want me to show it?
Yeah.
I'll show it.
Sure.
So when I come to the door and a councilor whose taxes, whose salary I pay for my taxes, pushes me and tries to prevent me from coming in, that's not appropriate.
I apologize.
And I accept your apology. I'm explaining.
Because yes, you can go anywhere you want.
I accept your apology. So I'm explaining to you that if the very first thing that happens is an elected official pushes me back, and let's be clear, I don't care, start shooting it. Okay, but what am I doing? Am I trying to go into the meeting? Am I trying to go into the meeting? Am I trying to go into the meeting? Who's stopping them? I'm not pushing away.
You
I can stand here. That's all I said. Nothing more, nothing
Make
less.
sure it's not intimidating for seniors to get housing.
Yes, black people are intimidated.
I can't believe she said that. Like,
Well,
you're
again,
not, you're not even the one that pushed anyone, and you're not.
Right. I was the victim. And Councillor Chang heard Councillor Fletcher say, I apologize. So she knows that she pushed me. She knows she's in the wrong. And then she's asking me not to be intimidated.
I suspect there might have been a glass or two of Chardonnay that may have helped.
Yeah. And let's be clear. I was being tongue in cheek by saying, oh yeah, black people are intimidating. But what did she mean by that though? Like, what did she really mean by me when all I'm doing is standing there and saying hi to people as they go into the meeting, which is perfectly allowed.
I have no idea.
Like, not only is it allowed, it's illegal to stop me from doing it.
Yeah, no, it's a very strange way of getting your point across. Who was shooting that footage?
Oh, one of my campaign workers. I asked him after I was pushed. I said, "You take out your camera and you roll camera. No matter what happens, if anyone comes up to you and says you can't film them," I said, "You keep filming," because I was afraid that they were going to accuse me the way they accused Giorgio Mammoliti of assaulting them or pushing them. So I said, "You run camera so that they cannot accuse me of doing anything illegally." Anything illegal, anything inappropriate. I just said, you just run camera. And that's what he did. And all I was doing was standing there, and the councillor staff came to bother me, and it was just a mess. And I have to say,
going in?
Sorry?
Did you end up going in and listening?
No, I didn't go into the meeting. I wasn't gonna push my way into a meeting. But I'll say this: we have really important issues. We have homeless people. We have an opioid crisis. People are dying. We have a crisis on our transit system. We have a financial crisis at the city. We have a housing crisis, affordability crisis, and they're worried about whether I sit in the room and listen to 60 people. Half of them don't speak English. Talk to me.
It's very intimidating for the seniors,
and
Rob Davis.
Pardon?
It's very intimidating for the seniors, Rob.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Well, I just shave all of my gray hair off. The little known fact, I'm pretty close to that seniors number as well. So
now you're a skinhead too. See?
Yeah,
you're intimidating.
Right. Yeah.
I find politics to be infuriating at the best of times, but municipal politics really is probably the thing that makes me the most frustrated. And the reason why is because it is the one place, if you look at provincial, federal, and municipal, municipal is where you can actually see the fruits of your labor. It's where you can figure out if what you're doing for the community is good for the community, because not only is that your riding, but that's where you're riding. That's where your work is visible to the people, to the community that lives there. Federal, provincial, not so much. It's a little bit more macro. Is there a part of you that that wants to see? And I'm going to try to word this in a way where it doesn't sound conservative or progressive, but there is the budget in Toronto is so big now, and I think it's like, I don't know if it's 51% or something is basically admin, and that's including police. Is there any other places other than the sign situation where, do we need to figure out a way to cut property taxes? Do we need to figure out a way to sort of curb the market in real estate so that people can actually make less than 40 grand a year and get an apartment in Toronto? How can we address things like that? I mean, public housing used to be just for homeless people. There needs to be a second tier of public housing for people who make a decent living, say 50 grand a year or something, but just can't. Listen, my wife and I, when we moved out, our combined income was like 180 grand, and we couldn't afford it because we had 2 kids. We lived in the beaches. We didn't have a home that we bought. We rented for like $1,800 a month, but then we had all these kids' expenses, yada, yada, yada. We had debt, and we're just like, what are we doing? You know, I have a 4,000 square foot house now, and I happen to live in by myself. It's $1,000 a month rent.
Right.
I need to understand why, and maybe you don't even, this might not even be something that you could do as mayor or as a councilor, but the idea that to me, real estate is like the centerpiece of everything wrong with big cities in Canada. And I don't know how to address that.
So firstly, I think the city of Toronto has created a circumstance where the land transfer tax, the municipal land transfer tax, has created not just a barrier to entry, but a barrier to transactions. So even, let's say you own a house and you were lucky enough to buy that house in the beaches back when, and it's worth $2 million today.
Right.
So you wanted to get out of that $2 million semi in the beaches and buy the $2.5 million fully detached home in the beach. So you got real estate fees of $100,000. And then when you buy the $2.5 million property, you have $50,000 in city land transfer tax, another $30,000 or $40,000, maybe $50,000 in provincial land transfer tax. And now to buy that $2.5 million home, it's a $200,000 transaction cost.
Yeah.
So what you're going to
like
do?
1,100 square feet.
Say again?
It's like 1,100 square feet.
Yeah. So you're saying, well, we're going to stay here, and instead of we'll put $50,000 into the kitchen, or we'll make the basement more comfortable, or we'll, that's the problem. So what's happened is it's created inertia on the transaction. So the reason there's not supply, there's not listing supply, is because people who got into the market before the city put in the additional land transfer tax are saying, I'm not moving because the cost of the transaction for me to move, I like the East End, I want to go to the West End, I like the North, I want to be by the lake. They're not moving. And so there's no supply. So now there's a lot of people wanting to buy. There's limited supply. They're driving up the prices. The land transfer tax, also for people who are entering the market, it takes away quality of life for them, because now they don't have that extra. If they're buying $1 million home, they don't have that extra $17,000, $18,000 to fix the kitchen or fix the porch or rebuild the garage or renovate the basement so they can rent it out and get more income, right? And provide a second unit in their home. So I just think we have to, this is this unintended consequences I talked about earlier. So I think we have to look at dialing back the land transfer tax, possibly, eliminating it for an entire class of homes under a certain amount of money, in order to have all of entry-level homes at the bottom start to circulate again so people can get into the market. That's number one. Number two, I think council has made some mistakes in terms of how the rezoning application process goes. So if you put in an application, you're lucky enough, you buy a piece of land, you want to put 150, 200 units. The process of circulating your application and having it approved is never ending. And so council is at the Ontario Land Tribunal with almost every application, and it's stalled out because they're just not doing their job. Like City Hall is, I talked to a developer the other day. He said, I wrote a check for $1 million for them to process my application, and they never did. And so now I'm at the Land Tribunal fighting them. And I said, and I said, how many days do you have? He said, well, I have about a 9-day hearing. I said, well, that's going to cost you about $400,000. He goes, well, more about $600,000. So now he's spending $600,000 to go to a tribunal to have the tribunal render a decision because city council didn't.
Yeah.
Even though he paid this fee. So those are
I
jobs.
find it hard to
great
feel sorry for
trade
that
jobs, construction jobs, and housing. All stalled because City Hall isn't doing its job.
I find it hard to feel sympathy for that guy, although I'm sure it's really annoying. But the people, like, I lived in the beaches for the last 5 years of my time in Toronto, and there were two things that I noticed about real estate that really bothered me. The first thing was, I knew a lady who lived a couple houses down, and she had a house, and the semi was probably about 1,200 square feet.
Right.
Down the road, like 6 houses away, some guy bought 2 houses side by side, knocked them both down, built a mansion, and then when he sold it, her property tax went up $800 a year.
Right.
I don't, that to me, that is funny math. I don't, and look, I don't have that type of brain where I understand the legit reasons as to why.
Yeah.
I just don't think it should ever be an option. Like I'm just like, well, why your property tax when you buy your house should reflect the value of your home when you bought it, not if a guy builds a mansion and then I guess the somehow your value of your home increases. It feels like funny math to me.
So the magic of current value assessment is
Funny math.
Assess the current value assessment is the system that they use to evaluate the value of your home, which is then used to be multiplied against the tax rate of the local municipality to calculate how much you pay in taxes. So current value assessment, the underlying principle is that your home is highest and best use. So if in the beaches prices went up 40%, but in the rest of Toronto they only went up 20%, then taxes in the beaches went up relatively higher than everywhere else.
Right. Okay.
And in fact, some places might actually get a reduction in their taxes conceivably. So the problem is property taxes are not a measure of your ability to pay. They're a measure, it's a tax basically on your wealth, which you have no control over.
Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't like was that the landlords that owned the businesses that were ground floor along Queen Street didn't have to pay any taxes if their storefront was vacant, and then they would just hold out for the sucker that would pay $8,000 a month in rent.
Right. So they do pay taxes, but they pay a reduced tax. So if your property is vacant, a commercial or retail property, you pay a reduced amount. You pay a rate based on it being vacant. And there were some loopholes as well. Sometimes people would have a unit and they would take out the windows and it'd be an unfinished or under renovation. They just make sure one window was out. There's all sorts of tricks that people in the business would utilize to game the system. So property taxes are a regressive form of taxation because they're not based on your ability to pay. So there's been a lot of talk about changing the system. I'm not sure that we're going to see that anytime soon, but what we have seen is a lot of services being offloaded as user pay. So garbage is sort of a user pay system. They actually tax you twice. It's on your property tax, and then they charge you for the bins on your water bill.
That's a Rob Ford policy, isn't it?
Well, that was something that happened before Rob Ford got there, and then what they've done is they've added this 2% city building tax, which is built in to every year. So even though this year taxes went up 5%, property tax, it's really 7% because they sort of pre-approved this 2%, and that way they never have to announce taxes, a higher increase in the tax rate. Here's the problem, though. If inflation has been 1% and 2% for all of these years, while council has increased property taxes at twice the rate of inflation, it means that with compounding, property taxes are really going way above people's ability to pay, assuming that their pay has been rising at the rate of inflation.
And property taxes, I don't know if you guys realize, those listening at home, is like, I think it's like half the entire budget for Toronto is made from property taxes. Like it's insane. So I can see why the city might want to. Let me ask, before I let you go, I want to talk to you a little bit about debates. And I want to know if you are confident that you will be selected by people who shouldn't have the power to select. Who are the top 5 candidates? I mean, when you have an election that has like 50 some odd people running,
right.
How do you choose who, not you, but the royal you? How do we go about, how does the media go about deciding who the top tier candidates are? Like, where do they rely on polling firms? Do you know how this works?
So different organizations have different criteria. I have a neighbor who's organizing an all candidates debate. He said anyone who's held office before, anyone who's held a position of sort of, lack of a better word, authority, or been a senior executive in a large organization, he's going to be including them in his debate. Some organizations are going to do it solely on polling, which kind of is counterintuitive, because if you can't get exposure by being in the debate, then of course you're not going to be polling very well. So it's kind of you're rewarding people for just being well known versus whether they're capable or have the skills and ability. So it's hard to break through. And I'm in an odd position because I'm not a councillor currently, but I was a councillor. So my name recognition may not be as high as somebody who has actually less experience than me. So I have 9 years of experience as a city councillor, 2 years on the Catholic School Board, so 11 years in total. One of the opponents, Brad Bradford from the Beach, he's been on council 4 years plus the last 6 months.
Right.
So I don't know, they might include him because he's polling better than me, and I might get excluded, notwithstanding the fact that I have more experience.
So are you worried about that process?
No, I'm not worried about that. I'm fully confident I'll be included in enough debates. I'll be able to, I think, flex my debate muscles and my intellectual rigor in front of enough voters that they'll see that I'm qualified and that I'm the best candidate for the job.
Well, listen, I wish you well. If I was in Toronto, I shouldn't say that. I definitely will. My rapport with you has always been really good. I can't remember how we met. It was years ago, online, digital kind of thing. Like I think I reached out and asked you a question about something. But like, you're a viable candidate in an election that often has a shortage of viable candidates.
That's very kind of you.
Well, listen, like and like I said, like this is one of those weird elections, and it's in that in between spot where no one really knows what's going to happen. There are a lot of weird characters running. But there are some people that you have to say, okay, they have good experience. Yourself, Olivia Chow, people like that, where you might not agree on a lot, but at least there's a competence there. And I wish you luck. And Rob Davis, thank you for joining us on Blackballed today.
Well, thank you very much, and be well, everybody. And as my grade 10 history teacher used to say, vote early and vote often.
That's right. Well, you're talking to the right guy. I did vote 3 times in the election one time, so but we'll talk about that later. Thanks, Rob Davis. Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
You too. That was Rob Davis. guys, if you're living in Toronto, you should go and check out his campaign site and check out the issues that he's involved with. Yes, he is. He's a progressive conservative as far as having ties to that party goes. But I'm telling you, like there's no hardcore, corrupt, far right tendencies with this guy. He is he's the genuine article. And I haven't even looked at his platform yet. I wanted to do this interview sort of clean like that and just sort of talk to him and get to know him a little bit. But I encourage you to go check that out. We have Casual Friday coming, and tomorrow I don't have it set up yet, so I'm just not going to announce it yet. But I also wanted to just really quickly talk about something that was, interesting to me. And also a little bit kind of concerning, and that is the interview that I did with Chomsky, and the environmental message that he had when I was talking to him. I've been thinking about what he said at the end of that interview a lot, and it was about my question regarding whether or not we should have hope when it comes to climate change. And I got to tell you, I was really disappointed to get a bunch of messages about how it really is a hoax. And people sending me these charts and these graphs and like, oh, look at the ice in Antarctica and this and that. And I'm a little bit more than concerned about how easily we surround ourselves with tech and put on headphones and get lost in Netflix and kind of just don't think about it. I guess I'm talking about apathy. Is apathy better than spreading disinformation? Probably. But is apathy the result of being hit with disinformation? Partially. And then I had people, this is hilarious. I had people who emailed me because they heard me say, I don't even remember what podcast it was on, but they heard me say that I thought it is hypocritical for a person to preach environmentalism and then fly a private jet. Because that's a talking point that they used to use against Al Gore. If you saw how much, one trip from New York to Los Angeles in a private jet is, I don't remember the number, but it's like driving your car for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. It could be months. I can't remember what it is. But it really is kind of like a gross way to get somewhere, and you're doing it just because you can afford to. Point is, I found it very kind of depressing that on one side I had people telling me that Chomsky's a commie and global warming is a hoax. Those people, I kind of expect them. But then the other people telling me that that I can't say that people shouldn't fly private if they're also calling themselves an environmentalist was really kind of just sad and depressing. I wanted to sort of do that interview, and I don't think I succeeded in this, but I wanted to do that interview and sort of get people to be like, hey, this guy, he's 94, and he may sound creaky, right? Because he's so old, but he's smart. He's clearly not trying to fool anyone. He's clearly not trying to make money from his position, which I think a lot of people on the right need to start to understand, that a grift is a grift is a grift. If someone makes their bread and butter by telling you that the 1 + 1 = 2 equation is wrong, they're lying to you. Noam Chomsky has no reason to lie, and he's far too smart to be tricked by the scientists. And despite the fact that he said things that I don't even know if I agree with, like we may already be too late and be heading for extinction. I don't know if that's necessarily true. It does sound a little bit alarmist, but I'm kind of like, so what? The rest of the things that he said were resonating. And then I got all these messages, and it was just really depressing. So, I don't know what I am going to do, but I feel like I need to write about it more at the very least, adjust my lifestyle I'll have you know that by not having a driver's license for the last 20 years or so, my carbon footprint is like, a fucking baby foot. And I'm not proud of that because I really didn't do it because of environmentalism. I just sort of Forrest Gumped my way. It's like wiping your face and giving that guy the smiley face idea. But I wonder if there's other things I can do. So I turned my thermostat down to like 65. Apparently that helps. And you know how hard it was to do that? I had to do this. That's what I had to do. And apparently I just saved like a ton of carbon emissions or something like that over the next 12 months or something. I can't remember what the number is, but apparently that's good. So I guess this is sort of an appeal, not to the idiots that say that Chomsky's a fool and global warming is a hoax. I don't know if there's even any hope for you guys. It's worth repeating that the people that started that mantra, that global warming is a hoax and climate change is a hoax, were literally the exact same lobbyists that were telling people that cigarettes were not addictive and did not cause cancer. Like, not the same type of people, literally the same individuals. So please, but I'm wondering if we all could, figure out something to do, and I'm not an environmentalist. I know I don't sound like one, so I'm not, it's not a surprise when I say I'm not one. But it did get me thinking about how lazy we can be and how apathetic we can be. And, if you don't mind not driving your car to work, if you're a single person and you drive your car and you live like on the outskirts of the downtown core in Toronto, you are kind of part of the problem. I'm sorry, but you are. You like when I moved to this small town, I when I got the job at the library, it's been 6 years now. And I at lunchtime, I said to my boss, Karen, I was like, "Hey, Karen, I'm gonna go and get a coffee. Would you like one?" And she's like, "You're gonna walk all the way there?" Dude, it would be like walking from Dundas to Queen along Spadina. I was just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go walk there." And they were like, "Wow, I've never seen a local walk so far." It's like, are you fucking kidding? I'm hopeful. I don't know why I'm hopeful, because it does seem like, big business doesn't care. It does seem like developing nations are supposed to get their chance to develop, even if they have 1 billion people. There's new mini industrial revolution. I guess they wouldn't be mini; they'd be about the same size. But there's industrial revolutions happening all over the place because of developing nations. I'm a little worried. I'm a little, and I'm worried because I'm ignorant, because I don't really know the data, but also because someone smarter than me, who seems to know the data and wrote books about it, by the way, is really worried. Now, is he an ends can justify the means person when it comes to the environment? Maybe. I don't know. Doesn't seem to be part of his MO. But it left something with me, and I think all these little tiny things that I'm doing, like turning the thermostat down, not driving a car, I'm buying meat locally now, so I don't have to feel guilty about all the transport pollution and the factory farm pollution and all that kind of stuff. So listen, I'm doing these really small things, but I don't know. I'm not trying to be preachy or anything, but it would be nice if maybe other people out there just did little things like that. I am not an example. I am following the lead of people that are far better people than me and smarter than me. People like Noam. And yes, I call him Noam. I talked to him yesterday, and and it was weird because he's like, "I think what you're doing is really important." And I said, "Really? Because I don't know what am I doing that's important? I have you on to talk about things that I am not smart enough to talk about." And he was like, "A lot of people won't even have me on to talk about it." And he's like, "But he's like, James, he's like, once a week it could be." And by the way, it's not lost on me how dope it is that I can have conversations with Noam Chomsky when I'm not on the show. I wouldn't call ourselves friends, but we're certainly good enough acquaintances where we can shoot the shit. And he's like, "James, you don't have to just have someone on Earth Day. Why don't you call my co-author, Bob Paul, and I'll tell him that you're calling, you can have him on." So that's what I did. So I'm going to have him on next month. I think I want to try to take the audience that I've built, and maybe once every couple of weeks to start, have someone on that focuses and the show focuses solely not on just on the environment, because that's a very macrocosmic way of approaching it, but maybe a retrofit expert, developer who will, or a construction person that, or even an engineer that tells us how retrofitting a building can save X amount of carbon tons or whatever it is, or having somebody else that can talk to us about how we can eliminate factory farming food. If we want to order it, through a local butcher or whatever it happens to be. I think I'm going to try to do that. So twice a month, I'm going to have Robert Paulin on in a couple of weeks. I'll see if I can have someone on before that, and sort of get off my ass and try to do something. It's modest, but I think maybe if other people do it too, then maybe we can at least hold our heads up and say that, like, we may have been part of the problem, but to a far lesser degree. So if you guys want to join me in that crusade, please do so. If you don't want to, that's fine too. And we'll see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Black.